Salamun alaikum.
Salam wa alaikum salam. How are you, my dear?
I'm so well, alhamdulillah, and doing a bit better now that you're on the line.
Yes, sir. I tell you, I'm definitely honored to be here with you.
All right. All right, all right, all right. So I'm going to let you introduce our subject for the evening and whatever you've been working on to introduce it to
Okay.
the public.
Okay.
We want to hear that this evening.
Yes, sir. So, Bismillah, with the signature of Allah, um, we want to open the session uh, seeking Allah's guidance and direction that what we say will be of benefit to ourselves and others. The title for this session is Cognitive Consonance versus Cognitive Dissonance.
That's a great title.
Yes, sir.
All right.
Thinking about our discussion this evening, one of the young men that works with me, I asked him a question. I said, uh, how often do you think about the air that we breathe? And after a little deliberation and thinking on it, he said, really, not much at all. And we went on to have a little dialogue about that because most of us give very little consideration to the air that we breathe unless we're challenged with some kind of crisis where the quality of air becomes an issue.
Yeah.
And and I said, well, do you know the words that we breathe words just like we breathe air, and we give very little consideration to the words that we breathe. And when you think about the world today, all over the world, there are millions and millions of people that are suffering from some kind of air pollution problem. There are millions of people that die every year because of poor air quality. And not to mention the other health issues that come about because of poor air quality. Well, I believe that the words in our, just like there's air in our environment that we breathe, the words in our environment, we are breathing those words. And it is the polluted word environment that's causing most of what we look at as cognitive dissonance. Now, when we say dissonance, we're talking about that which is not harmonious. We're talking about that which is disconnected, disjointed.
Yeah.
We're talking about actually the human mind cannot tolerate contradictions. And when there's a contradiction, we seek to come up with some kind of reason or rationality to, justify or to eliminate that contradiction. And this is really what is causing so much of so many of the mental health issues that people are faced with today. And moving on from that, so cognitive consonance is what some call the internal gyroscope. And we know that the gyroscope works they have it in cell phones, airplanes, ships. And when a plane leaves Atlanta going to uh, New York or wherever, it's said to be off course at least 90% of the time. But the gyroscope is constantly correcting the course that plane is flying in.
Got it.
Well, our internal gyroscope, or this concept of cognitive consonance, works in the same way. It helps to bring us back into balance when our values are aligned with our action. When our beliefs in these things are coordinated and they're working in sync, then we have that harmonious state called cognitive consonance.
Mm.
This brought me to my mind a statement that was made by Imam Muhammad when he said that as a people, we don't have a philosophical base that we operate from. Therefore, our life is pretty much a hit and miss ordeal.
Yes.
To
Mm.
me,
Mm.
that is the perfect explanation of cognitive dissonance. And so, in thinking about this subject, as you know, consonance is consonantally connected to consonant. They have the same consonants with the exception of the T in consonant. And the T, as you probably could, really give a more uh, elaborate definition or explanation of that. It could be that it has a feminine, meaning or significance
Absolutely.
attached to
Absolutely does. Yeah.
it. Yes, sir. So that's what I was thinking.
In fact,
And
the T in consonant is a feminine T.
yes, sir.
And the letter S in consonants, that S is also a distant, not a distant, pardon me, a near relative of T. Although
Mm,
we don't see the letters T and S in the same uh, consonantal category, although
right,
they're not brother and sister, in other words, like
right,
T and D. T and D are
right,
siblings,
right.
but T, D, S are cousins
Yeah.
because the T and the D are formed by the dentals, the teeth,
Mm-hmm.
and the teeth are in the front of the mouth. So any other consonants that are pronounced at the front of the mouth are also close related or even distant cousins. So S is up here,
Mm-hmm.
S.
Yes, yes,
And because D and T are also up here, you can still
yes,
interchange them. So you're right. You're right
yes.
on it. Yeah.
Yeah, I can see that. So, in um, in thinking on this, um, as we know, words make people, and as I was looking into this whole thing about we breathing words like we breathe air, and then I looked up the composition of air. And the composition of air is 78% is nitrogen, and 21% is oxygen, and the rest of 1% of other nutrients. And then I was thinking on how if you look at words as that which we breathe, mentally, um, then the word is broken. In that category, we have the consonant and we have the vowels. Those are the things that make up, the words that we use.
Yeah.
And in looking also at some relationships there, we know that nitrogen um, is very, very important for soil, the soil that grows the vegetation. Okay, and likewise, the consonant. If we look at the frequency of the nitrogen and the frequency that's in the consonants, the soil on one hand is also um, closely related, consonantly connected to the soul. So just like what we are looking at when we're talking about the words, the consonants and the vowels are like the nitrogen and the oxygen in the air that we breathe. Then the this what makes up our soul is very, very. There's some things that we can look at and do some comparison. Um,
Nice.
so I was thinking about, okay, we had this discussion. I was looking at Dr. Naeem's Akbar's book, The Community of Self, and he really, is dealing with the soul.
It's a great book. Yeah.
Yes, and he was talking about in the community itself, it deals with the seven components of the soul, of the soul, the self, which is the soul,
Yes.
and the drives, the senses, the ego, the memory, the reason, conscious, and free will, or the will. And how this is so in line with the seven energy centers that are within, the chakras. And as you very amply covered on many occasions, how when we can looking at we can talk about the lower soul and the higher soul. Now, lower soul are those three compartments, um, the energy centers, or from the drives, the senses, and the ego that manage those things that, as human beings, we have in common with animals. We all that's we all have that in common. But when we get to the state of the heart, where the heart it comes into play, um, then we get to a place where we begin to cultivate those higher energies that are within us. Um, and so, in the role that these consonants play is very, very important. And because, as I was thinking, the words that we use are just as, if not more important than the air that we breathe. Because the words that we use determine, in a lot of cases, the fact that there's so much polluted air that's all over the world. So when we change
Mm.
the word environment and improve the word environment, then we can also change our overall health and well-being.
Well
So
said.
those are
Hmm.
some of the things that I have really been thinking about, particularly in relationship to this topic that we want to breach tonight: cognitive consonance as opposed to cognitive dissonance. And
Right.
I'll kind of step back and for a minute.
Okay.
And
Well, we're gonna do some double dutch here.
okay,
And just to make a correction for those people who nitpick when they listen to these videos, he meant broach, not breach.
right, yes, right.
All right.
Thank you so much.
Um, well, my mother taught me to be a good listener. I listen even better than I speak. For those people who think I can speak well, I listen 3 times better than I speak. Yeah. Um, so you are so on it, man. You are so correct. And at your opening, you mentioned the question that you asked a partner of yours concerning how many people actually think about the air that they breathe. And it's an interesting thing that air is the most significant of the 4 basic elements.
Mhm.
Air is the most significant element that's necessary for all living forms, including the fish underneath the water. Believe it or
Yes,
not, they need air
yes.
in order to live. They breathe through their gills, they process
Mhm.
oxygen.
Yeah.
There's no other of the 3 elements that are needed across the board all of the time.
Mhm.
See, and you can lose or be away from some of the other 3. You can be away from water. People water fast for 2 or 3 days in a row. They don't drink any water,
Yeah.
and they're still here to tell you about it. But 3 minutes of air not being
Yeah.
able to circulate into the lungs and through the lungs and be processed, 3 minutes might render you at best brain dead, at
Yes.
worst
Yeah.
out of here, dead.
Yes.
So this is the way that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is able to teach the human being. The Quran calls these ayat, ayat, and that means
Mhm.
instructing signs.
Yes.
In all of these elemental forms, they are instructing signs from Allah.
Yes.
To do what, though? To instruct the human mind so that the human mind might be able to take better care of the human soul.
Mm-hmm.
The human intellect is a sort of guardian over the soul. So that makes the soul a very important uh, tool, if you want to refer to it as that. The soul is a tool,
Mm-hmm.
and it is an objective tool. It's really not subjective, not even to the individual. The soul is not looking to do what's good for the individual. That's the mind that does that.
Right.
The intellect is always looking and tuning into station WIFM, what's in it for me.
Mm-hmm.
The soul is not limited like that. The soul is looking to do what's good for the general picture, because
Right.
the soul probably on some primal level understands that it has to eventually return to the cosmos, and the cosmos is
Mm-hmm.
unlimited,
Yes.
right?
Right.
So when they look at this element of air, there are some people who have added what they call the fifth element,
Mm.
and they call that fifth element ether.
Yes.
Yeah. But
Mm-hmm.
on the higher level of the language, they also refer to it as a much more refined and universal air. They still
Yes.
call it air, ether. They call it air.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Um, so if in the five elemental setup, you have air being the primal element that produced these other four. And the
Mm-hmm.
other four begin with air, but in our temporal
Mm.
sense, the air that we breathe.
Yes.
And then it goes on to produce fire, and then earth, and then water, and whichever the strata is, whichever way it goes. But ether is the fifth. So in essence, no pun intended,
Mm-hmm.
we have five operating facilities that Allah has created for the human being to be able to grow and develop along with other living creatures. But we point out the human being in particular because the human being has been given a special designation by Allah
Mm-hmm.
to be a type of guardian over the rest of creation. In the Quran, one term for that is Khalifa, as you know.
Yes.
All right. Now, air is the element that can't be bought or sold. I can sell you water. I
Mm-hmm.
can go to the store right now and buy water.
Mm-hmm.
You know, uh, I can kindle and then put out a fire.
Yes.
And if I put out the fire, doesn't mean that you're going to necessarily be affected.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe you'll be a little colder.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe you can't cook your food. You got to find foods that are ready to go, but you won't die from not having fire right
Mm-hmm.
away. You'll be inconvenienced, but you won't
Mm.
die.
Right.
All right. Water, we know you have to have it after a certain amount of time, like we mentioned
Mhm.
earlier, but you won't die immediately from not having water. All of
Right.
these elements, by the way, are given to us in the Quran.
Yes.
We have the Prophet Musa, alayhi salam, who said, I perceive a fire.
Yes.
Yeah, and he was in the middle of the desert
Mm-hmm.
in the darkness of night with his wife and child.
Yes.
And he wanted to stop securing her immediate self
Mm-hmm.
so that he could go a distance because he thought there was going to be some benefit in that distance for the collective self.
Yes.
All right. And that's what he told her. He said, I perceive a fire. I'm going to go check it out. You stay here. I'm going to go check it out. And
Mm-hmm.
maybe there's some information there for me, or maybe it's just I can help us warm our hands and toes, whatever it was. He had a wide gamut of reasons why he wanted to go
Right.
visit that fire. But the interesting thing in the Quranic language, and then I'll let you speak on this, the words that Allah is using is anastu nar,
Mm.
and anastu is him referring to his own perception.
Yes.
I perceive a
Yes.
fire. Now,
Mm.
perception is something that is invisible to people who are not perceiving what you're perceiving.
Mm-hmm.
I have to tell you about my perception.
Right.
Now,
That's
we're
true.
talking about this cognitive dissonance. I
Yes.
have to tell you about my experience. And then you have to be the one to say, no, that ain't what it is. Whatever you're
Right.
seeing is make believe, or
Mm-hmm.
or what you're trying to get me to see.
Mm-hmm.
I don't see it.
Mm-hmm.
You're making that up. I'm not crazy. I'm not ignoring reality. You know, I'm not cognitively
Mm-hmm.
distanced from my own reality. And this is what the entire world basically has been shoved into. That's the corner we've been shoved into. So when you try to explain a person's issues and say, here's what you're going through clinically and cognitively, they say, no, you're wrong. So what they have done in effect is turn off their hearing. And Allah speaks about that in the Quran.
Mm-hmm.
He
That's
speaks
right.
in one case of them being deaf, dumb, blind. And he
Mm-hmm.
puts, you know, in the world, we say blind, deaf, and dumb.
Yes.
In the Quran, Allah corrects the order and he says deaf,
Mm.
dumb,
Yeah.
and deaf,
Right.
dumb. He doesn't even say and.
Mm.
This is how nuanced the Quran is.
Right.
The Quran doesn't say what we say when we interpret that verse. We say deaf, dumb, and blind. There's no wa, there's no and in there. It's deaf,
Mm-hmm.
dumb, blind. Why do I believe Allah excluded the and? Because all three of them are the same thing. We're operating on different levels of dysfunction
Mm-hmm.
and they
That's right.
affect each other. When you stop
Mm-hmm.
listening, it's going to affect how you see things.
Yes.
See? And when you stop seeing things, it's going to affect how you process things.
Right. Yes.
See? I didn't give it
Yeah.
in the correct order, but it's when you stop listening, it's going to affect how you process things. And
Process.
when your processing is affected, then it's going to affect how you see
You see
things
it. Yes.
cognitively. That's what
Mm-hmm.
cognitive means,
Mm-hmm.
cognition in the
Mm.
intellect, speaking about
Yes.
the intellect, right?
Mm-hmm.
They're, all three of those are speaking about the three different levels of the triune brain.
Mm-hmm.
Because when we say uh, deaf, we're talking about not hearing a thing,
Mm-hmm.
okay?
Right.
And it is your instincts that are the initial ears that pick up frequencies and vibrations around you.
Mm-hmm.
You have an inner feeling for things. As soon as you see something, it's going to register on your central nervous system.
Right.
That's what I'm calling hearing.
Mm-hmm.
Not through these necessarily, although these develop before the
Mm-hmm.
eyes, but we're really talking about how information is processed within the human brain.
Mm-hmm.
And the first thing is that it comes in as a resonance,
Mm-hmm.
consonants, resonance,
Mm-hmm.
sonance, sonar,
Mm-hmm.
sonar,
Mm-hmm.
hearing, sound,
Yes.
sound, everything in this universe, we're told now by the best of metaphysicians, is that the universe itself is sonic or sonar or a resonance or what we call sound.
Mm-hmm.
Everything exists within sound waves that look like this that I'm
Yes.
doing with my
Yes.
hand. Now, look like waves in
Yeah.
the water, or it looks like
Yes.
airwaves if you could see
Mm-hmm.
airwaves and their patterns. So
Mm-hmm.
that's the first stage. The first stage is hearing. Allah says He created us in the wombs of our mothers, hearing and
Yes.
seeing in that order.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, somebody responded to one of my YouTube videos where I mentioned that, and they said, I never thought about the order that Allah put
Yeah.
that in. And I'm
Mm-hmm.
saying you don't have to think about the order when your professor tells it to you, because he's
Mm-hmm.
not putting any importance on the order. But
Mm-hmm.
whenever Allah puts something in a particular order, then we should pay very close attention.
Yes.
Because what Allah is saying is actually above modern science and what
Yeah.
they've so far to think that they've discovered.
Yeah.
So you jump from that into the second category, and that is dumbness.
Mm-hmm.
And dumb is now a pejorative word in the English lexicon. They don't like for you to call people dumb.
Right.
But dumb is a scientific word because it comes
Yeah.
from the Arabic word dam,
Mm-hmm.
and dam means blood.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So you're going from the sonar aspect of your development, being able to hear frequencies. The Quran
Mm-hmm.
itself is a frequency.
That's right.
The word Quran doesn't mean to read. It means to read, but it means to read frequencies, not
Mm-hmm.
words on a paper.
Mm-hmm.
There's another word for that. The suhuf, the purified
Mm-hmm.
pages, that's in the Quran. That's
Right.
what the Quran is as a book. What the Quran
Mm-hmm.
is as a resonance See, that's different.
Hmm.
It's sound
Right.
and how sound is registering in the mind, right?
Hmm.
So then you have the dumb. Let's explain the word dumb. And then I won't mess around too much with the blindness because that'll take us somewhere else. But you'll be able to figure it out after you hear what dumb is. D-U-M-B, silent B. That's the key.
Right.
That's the clue.
Mhm.
Silent B. If you look at the letter B, capital letter B in English, as that profile picture that they give it to us, that's actually your human lips,
Mhm.
with the bottom semicircle being a bit more extended than the top, if it's
Right.
written correctly. You have the
Mhm.
spine of it, then you have the top semicircle, then you have the bottom, which is a little bit bigger. So
Yeah.
that represents your ability to communicate.
Mhm.
Dumb.
Yeah.
So now what is dumb? Dumb is the inability to communicate.
Mhm.
If you don't give people what they want in court when they ask you certain questions about were you there on the night of the 12th and did you kill Mr. Roberts, and you say, I don't know what you're talking about. I wasn't even there, and you know you were there.
Mhm.
They call it playing dumb.
Done. Yeah, that's
See,
right.
dumb has nothing to do with whether you actually know it or not. It has to do with
Mhm.
whether you express it or not. So the
Right.
letter B, representing the human lips, has to do with human expression.
Mhm.
And the nullification, some oftentimes the voluntary shh, shh, shh. See, you do that with your lips,
Mhm.
to your lips. Shh, shh, shh.
Yeah.
The voluntary uh, cutting off of the communication on your part. So
Mhm.
that's a deafness. In the Quran, it's called bukmun.
Mm. Yes.
Yeah, Bukman, bukmun.
Mm.
Actually, Bukmun.
Mhm.
Remember, there was a series, an African American uh, television comedy called Good Times.
Yes. Oh,
Yeah,
yes.
well, the you remember the name of the he wasn't the landlord, he was the fix-it guy.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, his name was Mr. Bookerman.
Bookman. Yeah. Right.
And
Yeah.
he was a behemoth dude. They made sure that they chose
Mhm.
a behemoth dude, a big dude,
Mhm.
right? For Mr. Bookman,
Mhm.
because the word behemoth comes from the word bookman.
Mhm.
Take the N off the end of it, that's a suffix. But if you look at the B, the K, and the M, and understand that K and H are gutturals from the back of the throat,
Mhm.
then ba ka ma is equivalent with bahama, and bahama gives us bohemoth.
Mhm.
This is how
Yes.
deep the Quran can take you in unraveling the mystery language of the
Yeah.
language conspirators.
Mhm.
Then lastly, you have umyun. And umyun is probably where we get the English word onion because of how the onion affects the eyes and causes
Yeah.
them to tear. So they call that
Mhm.
blindness.
Mhm.
When Yusuf's father in the Quran was lamenting over the loss of what he thought was the loss of Yusuf on the part of his brothers, it says
Mhm.
that his eyes became, it says that he became blind, but all it
Right.
means is that his eyes became full of tears. We know later on in the story, he wasn't blind.
Mhm. Right.
It just
Right.
means that things were put in the way of his vision that didn't allow him to see clearly.
Mhm.
Right? So all of
Yeah.
these things are operating cognitively within the human being's mental faculties. And that's what you're here to discuss. You're discussing a very important and a very uh, deep concept that affects each and every human being, no matter how much schooling you've had.
Mhm.
And again, as I mentioned, and I'll turn it back over to you now, I mentioned that this world of social manipulators have actually manipulated the language so that the language would cause an automatic dissonance.
Right.
An automatic dissonance, meaning when you're coming up in grade school and you go to kindergarten for the first time, that's where they begin
Yes.
training you for cognitive dissonance, for seeing what they want you to see, but not seeing what's in front of your eyes. They say, who are you going to believe, me or your
Mhm.
lying eyes?
Yeah. Yeah.
You seeing it, and they tell you, that
Mhm.
ain't what's there, man. And you say,
Yeah.
but wait a minute, I'm seeing it. Daddy was there.
Right.
Your eyes are betraying you. We've heard these sayings, right? So that's where we are right now. Now the key is in understanding how to unravel. What kind of psychiatry and psychology do we have to investigate in order to make corrections on this? I call it really like it's a demonic influence that they put most of the world under.
Hmm.
How would you approach that with
Yes.
this concept particularly?
Well, I think one of the things that promotes dissonance is in the language environment. Um, we know, for example, I was looking at a document and they were showing how under Hitler's regime, he changed the frequency of the music and everything in that environment from the normal frequency to what they say was I think it was either 450 or 550. I'm not
Hmm.
recalling it the
Hmm.
exact,
I understand
but
exactly
it
what you're
was,
talking about.
yeah, it was changed in order to promote mass conformity in under the language environment that they were trying to bring people to. And for the most part, um, that frequency is a frequency that promotes a what I call objectification of life. You know,
Hmm.
when people objectify, because we can go back and look at the energy centers again, and those energy centers that are on the lower realm that really where the lower the instinctual or survival issues, the pleasure issues, you know, and the emotional issue, where they are primarily concerned, they have geared those toward things that where people define themselves, they see themselves, uh, they find themselves by the things that they have, whether it's a title, whether it's a car, whether it's clothes, or a spouse or whatever.
Hmm.
Um, they see and define themselves in a very limited fashion that has to do with what I call the objectification, of their life, the materialization of their
Mm,
life.
wow. Yeah.
And to me, this is, the uh, Satan's biggest scheme. Um, I mean, this is where they sell most of the things that they sell. Um, and so when we are looking for ways to uh, bring about consonance or, take people from, it's really goes to many of the things, the subjects that you've been dealing with, in the classes. Um, it has to do with the elevation, of those energies that are within the soul. In particular, as Muslims, we know that we are it's enjoined upon us to establish the salat, to establish salat. We're told that over and over and over again. Well, unfortunately, um, that is a issue that has been usurped uh, because most of us, in particular, most of the Muslim world, have taken on the wrong um, significance or the meaning of what salat is, and it when um, you can objectify a people's um, view about life itself, about their relationship with the creator, the source creator, about their how they see serving, the creator. When that is objectified through the establishment of rituals, that it really makes people lazy. Because if I see that I can do some ritual and satisfy my need to worship and
Yeah, how
to
about that?
connect with the source
Shortcut.
creator.
You can shortcut it.
Right.
Get the rituals.
It
Yeah.
makes me it makes me lazy, and that's also what I call the objectification, of our lives, because we take something that is so high and so important and we materialize it. And now I believe that all I have to do, either go to the church if I'm Christian, or the synagogue if I'm a Jewish person, or the masjid if I'm Muslim, and just by those simple acts and engaging in those ritual activities, I have satisfied my obligation as a human being,
Wow.
and as what we may call a believer. And uh, and there's a movie I want to recommend that we see, and I know it's on YouTube, it's on Roku TV. The title of this movie is The Message and the Messenger.
Mm,
Now, it's a Christian-based movie, and it's based on a true story, and it's dealing with the prosperity church. And I won't take away the satisfaction of watching this movie, but I do want to mention the takeaway message for me.
yes.
To me, the takeaway message in this movie was, if as a as leaders, as institutions, or people dealing with people, if you are not invested or vested with an interest to raise and build a capacity in the people, then you have no right to ask them for anything. You have no right to ask them for money. If I'm a church, or if I'm in a masjid or whatever, if I am not uh, interested in raising the capacity of the people to earn and to be more productive, then you have no right to come and ask me for anything. And to me, that's one of the take-home messages in that movie. So I definitely recommend that movie as a something that we should watch.
Yeah. Well, I will definitely maybe it'll help speed things along if you send me a link for that so I can put it in the replay
Yes,
and
yes.
people can go
So,
straight to it and
okay, now
see
I
what that
don't know how to
represents.
get a link for it, because if a person have Roku TV, all they have to do
Uh-huh.
is put in the search the message and the messenger,
Okay.
and or either on YouTube just put in the same title.
Yeah. Well, let me write it down now so I don't have to scroll
Okay.
back through the video. Give me just one moment. Yeah. And I'll include it for those of you who are
Yes.
listening in the drop down box, the message and the
The
messenger.
messenger. Yes.
Okay. Yeah. Nice, nice,
Yes.
nice.
Uh,
Okay. Yeah, I got you.
so now, did I answer your question?
You answered questions I didn't even ask you. That's how I know I'm talking to a master.
Right.
See,
Oh,
the one who hasn't mastered, they answer with answers that have nothing to do with your question. But people like yourself and many others whom I've interviewed, I consider you to be masters of your particular train of thought. And that's because you give me what I ask you for. Plus, it's like going to the store and getting what your mother asked you to get. And when you get to the counter, they say, hey, these bananas are going to go bad if we keep them another day. So why don't you tell your
yeah,
mother or your grandmother, that these are free of charge, just go ahead and take
yeah,
it home. We don't want to waste
yeah,
this. And
yes, yeah,
people like yourself, those are the kinds of answers that you give me. You give me
yeah,
what I ask you for, but you have other stuff that you don't want to waste.
yeah,
People like
yeah.
us, see, we're like the what did they call that man, the one who was selling the washing machines?
The Maytag man.
Yeah, the Maytag man. He always saw himself as being lonely because nobody never
Yeah,
needed their machines fixed when they got them from Maytag.
yeah,
Yeah, the Maytag repair man. He's the
yeah,
loneliest guy in town.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So that's how we become
Mm,
in our explanations of the Quran, actually, because the Quran needs no corrections.
right.
You don't go to
Yes.
the Quran trying to correct Allah.
Mm,
See, so when you
that's
come with the
yeah,
Quran, it's going to automatically make you the loneliest person in town. So don't
Yes.
expect a whole lot of fanfare and rah-rah and,
Hmm.
that kind of thing. When you dedicated yourself to the understanding of and the explanation of Allah's word, it speaks for itself. It's like
Yeah.
Musa's rod when he was going
Hmm.
into battle against Firaun's company, against his army.
Yeah.
In fact, Allah told him in the practice session,
Hmm.
Allah
Yes.
said, "What is that in your right hand, Musa?"
Right.
"Oh, it's my
Yeah.
rod. What do
Yeah.
you do with it?" "Oh,
Yeah.
well, I beat back the brush. I feed my
Hmm.
sheep, my
Hmm.
sheeple people. I feed them with
Hmm.
this. I handle the mass psychosis that's been created by Pharaoh, and he's got a whole bunch of people who are under this herd mentality, and that's really what you've been describing earlier. It's
Yes.
really when you're not thinking with the intellect, with an
Yes.
independent mind, but
Mm.
you're looking at what the next person does, and then you look at what the majority of people are doing, and whether it makes sense to you or not, that's what you want to follow because you
Yeah.
want to be safe, and you think safety is in
Hmm.
numbers.
Right.
When in
Yes.
fact, according to all scriptures that I'm familiar with, safety is never in the numbers.
Ah, never.
That's hellfire
Yeah.
is ahead of that.
Yeah.
Of those people who
Yeah. Yeah.
follow the number, they number crunching. Oh, we have 1,000 people who took Shahada
Yeah.
this weekend. We
Yeah.
must be the purified masjid. No, not necessarily. You might be the hellified masjid. Depends on
Yeah.
what they're coming to you for. You promising them something, some
Hmm.
money or some infamy or something. This is where we're recruiting these members to go kill people, and your
Hmm.
masjid is being used for that, and that's why it's full every week because you got a bunch of disenchanted people who want to take up your cause and die as martyrs and all of that, hurting and killing and maiming innocent people. That's why your
Hmm.
masjid. That's why some masjids are full right now
Yeah.
in
That's sad.
America and overseas. They're full because
Mhm.
people are full of shit. Excuse me.
Yes.
They
Yes.
refuse to think for themselves
Sir.
what
Yeah.
Allah would be most pleased with.
Yes.
And then they cause these foolish people in the public to believe that if they're doing that and they're calling themselves Muslims, this must be what their God orders them to do.
Yeah.
Kill innocent, rape women, behead
Mm.
the babies. And I'm not pointing to any specific group because this
Hmm.
happens among all extremist groups and
Oh,
organizations.
sure.
We're not safe amongst any of them. The Muslims are not even safe amongst the extremist Muslims. The Jews are not, they're not safe amongst their own extremist Jews. Christians for
Mm.
sure are not safe against extremist Christians.
Yeah.
It's not
Yeah.
the religion that's doing it. It's the
Right.
extreme emphasis that they're putting on bleeding and dying and
Mm.
maiming and hurting.
Yes.
You understand? That's what's
Yeah.
doing it because, as you know, I always say, and science says, that whatever you give your attention to, it
It,
expands.
that's right.
So when
Expand.
you give your attention to terror, then terror is going to naturally take on a life of its own. And that's what's happening all around the world. We're
Hmm.
not responsible for what the Christians and the Jews and the other extremist people are doing, but we have to speak to it when Muslims are doing it because that is
Hmm.
supposed to be our interest.
Yes. Yes, indeed.
Yeah. So these subjects dealing with the mind, how the mind is constructed, how the mind is designed by the source
Hmm.
creator, and how the mind can be sometimes easily manipulated when certain factors are not addressed by the
Right.
people who claim to have knowledge.
Yes.
These
Right.
people on the higher up echelon of Islamic leadership, they are not addressing, in fact, they can't address the problem of the mind because they're suffering from the same
The
dilemma.
disorder.
The
Yeah.
same disorder. That's right. Those people
Yeah.
are cuckoo for Cocoa
Yeah.
Puffs in many
Yes.
cases.
Yes.
It's hard to
Yeah.
find a rational sheikh.
Hmm. Yeah.
You can find many imams maybe in America who are very rational.
Hmm.
Their ideas and thoughts are very well thought out. But I'm talking about the ones who are receiving thousands and millions of dollars.
Hmm.
You understand? Who are
Yeah.
given a position in the
Mm.
masjid
Yes.
or in the organization, in the
Mm.
501c3, that if they say the
Yeah.
wrong thing, it's like these politicians,
Yeah.
if they say the
Yeah.
wrong thing, they get cut off from the
Yeah.
money.
Yes.
So some of them, I can see it in their faces when they're asked questions that they know the truth to, and they still lie to you.
Yes.
about these very
Mhm.
basic things. What is Islam? What is Salat? What is Zakat? What is Saum? What is, Shahada? Where did
Mhm.
Shahadatain come from? Where did two Shahadas come from? Is that in the Quran, Brother Imam? And then likes to wiggle like the snake. He goes into his serpentine mode and he starts
Mhm.
to wiggle around the truth until he gets to his particular objective, which in most cases has nothing to do with what's in the Quran itself.
Right.
And we have a
Absolutely.
lot of budding champions
Mhm.
for truth that are just appearing. Boop, boop, boop. They're all over YouTube now.
Mhm.
Brother named Baba Shuaib.
Yeah.
There's another gentleman, of course, our elder who I interview very often, Dr. Omar Zaid.
Oh, yes. Yes. Yes.
And I can name at least 10 more right off the top of my head. But if you look
Yeah.
at our video channel, you'll know who they are because they're all
Yeah.
being interviewed.
Oh, yeah.
And although
Yeah.
I can't say that I agree with every single thing that they say,
Mm,
I don't have to agree with every single thing that
mm,
they
right.
say. All I have
Right.
to do is agree with the gist
Mm,
of what they're
mm,
saying. And the
yes.
gist, on the most part, for all of them, is that we've been sold the okey doke when
Yes.
it comes to what Islam is. In fact, if they were
Mhm.
teaching us straight up, they'd stop calling it just Islam and go back to what the Quran calls it.
Yeah, let's.
There you go.
Yeah.
Al Islam, definitive
Yes. Yes.
Islam. The rest
Mhm.
of it is generic, created in a lab.
Mhm. Yes. Yeah. Yes, indeed. Yes.
Yeah. So continue, man.
Yeah.
This is
Yeah.
good.
So, yeah. And the the other thing that I think is a source of great dissonance is something that you have covered. To me, is very, very important, and that is the true meaning of man and woman. Uh, because um, when we think about the human mind and how it works, the role of the subconscious mind is to keep us safe and sane. And anything that we don't comprehend or understand, it suppresses it. And so um, the subconscious mind is said to be at least 90%, of our mental makeup, and the 10% of the conscious. So, and the way we have been conditioned or programmed to think, and then look at women for an example. A lot of it has to do with, subconscious behavior as it relates to emotion
Yes,
and
sir.
memory and things of that nature. And so a lot of the cognitive dissonance comes about because people are functioning and they are really looking at um, particular women, in that subconscious role, in that role where it's really just tied to, what we've been conditioned to see as the role of women in the society, and having to do with, um, just pure, emotional makeup, and so and unfortunately, to a certain extent, it becomes what is called a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Mm.
People begin to really see themselves and react in those kinds of ways. So I think um, with what when we look at um, the um, the NISA, as has been explained, as that a part of the community or the society that needs the support of the Rajal. You know, that to me, has um, given so much balance to the way we should look at male and female, roles. Because men can be in that Nisa position, just like women can be in that Rajo position.
That's right.
So when we look at it, because these are major issues that affect family life as the cornerstone of the society, and affect the general community life because people are seeing themselves in ways that are really not healthy. And
Yeah.
so I just, put that out and for any comments that you want to make on that.
Yeah, you reminded me of something that people like yourself and others were taught in the days of the original Nation of Islam,
Yes.
established by Elijah Muhammad. And Elijah Muhammad was taught that by his teacher, who was an immigrant from India. And he called himself Master Farad Muhammad, also known
Mm-hmm.
as W.D. Farad, not to be confused with W.D. Muhammad. W.D. Muhammad was
Mm-hmm.
named after W.D. Farad. Before
Right.
he was born, he was given that name.
Yes.
But W.D. Farad left a package of information called the Lessons. And in the lessons, he spoke about um, what I now believe to be these different sections of the human brain and how they operate. But he gave it to us in symbols, in numerology, and in mythology.
Mm-hmm.
And one of those ways of describing people was, oh boy, I didn't realize I had an 8 o'clock class. He's
Oh,
trying, he's trying to chime in now,
okay.
so we're going to wrap
Good.
it up. But
Okay. Good.
he didn't realize that that he was giving us proper dimensions for what's actually going on in the intellect of the human being. He gave it to
Mm-hmm.
us as the 85%, the 10% that you just mentioned,
Mm-hmm.
and the 5%. Now,
That's
listen
right.
very carefully to how he did
Mm-hmm.
this, and we can do this in less than 5 minutes, inshallah, and then have a session 2 with you, my friend.
Good. Right.
85%, I believe, is referring to 85% of the brain and what you
Yes.
call the subconscious content.
Right. Mm-hmm.
10%, he said, referred to the poison flesh eaters.
Yes.
In short, the poison
Mm-hmm.
flesh eaters.
Mm.
Now, 10% of the brain is called the conscious mind.
Yes.
85% of the brain is called the subconscious mind.
Mm-hmm.
So what's left when you add 85 and 10 together? You get 95. So there's still a 5%. And this is the
Yes.
emphasis in the Nation of Islam and in the group that came to be called the 5% poor righteous teachers.
Mm-hmm.
They call it the nation of gods and earths. That's how they refer to men and
Mm-hmm.
women, as gods and earths. All right. So 85%, we got it. Subconscious. All right. All right.
Mm-hmm.
And those were the ones who were just, following the herd.
Yes.
Right. 85%.
Yeah.
I think those were the poison flesh eaters, if I'm remembering correctly. Then you had the 10%, I think, were the ones who were leading the 85%.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have the 5% who were separated from both of them, and they were called the poor righteous teachers, the 5%
Yes.
of poor righteous teachers, the ones who you could depend on to put you back on Sirat al-Mustaqim, my language, put you back on the right road. So
Right.
how is this being established? Listen to this carefully. If the 85% represents the subconscious content, and the 10% represents the 10% of consciously thought out stuff in the brain,
Mm-hmm.
then the 5% must equal the instinctive drives.
Yes.
So
Yes.
here's how I deduce this. I say that the 5% is what you need to go back to because it's the poor righteous teacher. Now that's your instinctive drive. So
Mm-hmm.
that gives me the impetus to study all over again what the instincts actually do.
Right.
And I started doing that recently, and I've been finding gems of wisdom in
Mm-hmm.
what the instinct, we just kind of brush it off like that's the serpent mind, that's the reptilian brain.
Mm-hmm.
But the whole mental processing started when Allah created the reptilian brain, the R
Yeah.
complex.
Yeah.
So, audience members, you should go study those 3 levels of the brain: the conscious
Mm-hmm.
brain, neocortex on top,
Mm-hmm.
the middle brain, limbic brain, or mammalian brain in the middle, emotional brain, and then study the core brain, the brain that secures the head to the spine and the human nervous system. That's got to be the most important. They call it the
Yes.
cerebellum also,
Yes.
right?
Mm-hmm.
That's connected to the spinal column
Okay. Yeah.
directly. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So this is basically what we're dealing with as a challenge. You know, if you want to be righteous teachers, then you have to go back to the righteousness that Allah has established within your first brain.
Yes. Yes.
You understand what I'm saying? Yeah,
Yes. Absolutely.
yeah, yeah. So
Yeah.
you know, in your instincts, and the best way to understand the instincts is to study the infant, not to study the
Yeah.
adults. You know, their instinctive
Mhm.
brain has been poisoned by the
Yes.
poison flesh eaters.
Yeah.
But the baby, as an
Mhm.
instinctive, when you try to overfeed a baby and see what happens,
Yeah.
can't do it.
Yeah.
Can't do it.
Mm.
Try to keep a whole lot of disturbing sounds in the baby's environment. The baby's going to have a hissy fit
Yeah.
because the fitra of the infant, as Allah created that infant, is designed for peace and comfort and warmth and joy and smiles and hugs.
Mm.
That's clocked into the instinctive drive because it means I'm safe, and that's what the instinctive brain does. It requires that you be safe or do things to bring yourself to safety.
That's consonants.
There you go. There you go. You understand.
Yes.
Right? And
Yes.
it's also the Muslim in you. Muslim is an
Yeah.
instinctive behavior in human beings. It's not
Yeah.
somebody who took Shahada. It's
Mm.
any child who's born, as the Prophet has said, that all babies are born ala al-fitra, upon the fitra. And then they also translate it as born Muslim. So
Mm.
Muslim is not you sticking your finger up,
Mm.
finding out which way the wind blows.
Mm.
You see,
Yeah.
Muslim is inherent in your nature. It's a part of your instinctive drive
Yes.
to be this, to
Yeah.
do this, and to keep that safe. So when you look up the root word for Muslim, salima, is going to say to be safe.
Mm-hmm.
You see?
Yes.
Not
Yes.
necessarily to be peaceful, although they say Muslim and salam means peace, but first and foremost, it means that you have uh, endeavored to bring yourself by whatever means, we say by whatever means necessary, you know, Malcolm,
Mm-hmm.
to bring yourself by whatever means. That's what the instinctive brain will do. It'll look for any measure
Mm-hmm.
to save itself.
Right.
And what does Allah say? Save yourselves and your
Yeah.
families
From the
from the
north.
from the nar, from the
Yeah.
fire. All right, so
Yes.
we got to cut it there so I can,
Alhamdulillah.
yeah.
Thank you so much.
We'll
Yes,
talk
sir.
again. I might give you a quick call when I'm finished with this brother here. This is only an
Okay.
hour here. This is
Okay.
ambush.
Alhamdulillah. Yeah, I saw that. That was very
Yeah,
good. I enjoyed
yeah,
that. Yeah.
yeah. Well, you know, Musa
Okay.
says, they say of Moses that he spoke to a burning bush. This is our burning bush, Mr.
Yeah.
Ambush.
Yes. Alhamdulillah. All right.
All right. Now I'm going to close this one out and bring the other one
Okay.
in.
Okay,
All
then.
right.
Thank you.
Matter of fact, I think what I'll do is I'll just shift from, no, I think I
Okay.
can. No,
Oh,
no, no, no. Let me come out and come back in. So it'll be two separate recordings.
okay, then.
But thank you,
Very
my
good.
friend. Appreciate that.
Yeah, thank you.
Wisdom from the West is what we call this. Imam Amaya, you remember his book, Wisdom from the
Yes. Oh,
West?
yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
yes.
As the
Absolutely.
light shineth from the east,
From the east, even unto the west.
even unto
Even.
the west.
Yes.
So shall the
Yes.
coming of the Son of Man be. So start looking for that Son of Man, but look for him
Yes.
right here. This Son, the
Yes, sir.
S-U-N of
Yes.
M-A-N, the mind. Salam
Alhamdulillah.
alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam.
Okay.